I watched as Rachel, with a cold, dismissive smile, closed the door behind her and locked it. The man, Derek, her old friend, was gone, but the betrayal lingered in the air like a thick fog. My heart pounded as I stood frozen, staring at the now empty hallway where just minutes ago she had been laughing with him, her hand casually brushing against his. I had caught her, and I couldn't believe it. The weight of the moment hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always trusted her, believed in us. But seeing them together, seeing her act as if I wasn't even there, shattered that trust in an instant. There were no words, no explanations, just the cold reality that she had been lying to me for months. I took a few shaky steps into the living room, my mind racing with questions. Why had she done this? How long had it been going on? But the most painful question of all was the one I couldn't shake. Why had she chosen him over me? The anger I had been holding back finally spilled over. What the hell, Rachel? I shouted, my voice shaking. She didn't flinch. She turned slowly, her expression almost bored, as if the confrontation was nothing more than a nuisance. You don't understand, she said flatly. He's different. I needed something more than you were giving me. Those words hit harder than any physical blow ever could. I had spent years working, trying to make her happy, trying to provide for her and our family. And this was how she repaid me. I couldn't even look at her anymore. I knew I needed to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. But what was the next step? Should I fight for her? Or should I walk away from the woman who had already walked away from me? The pain was overwhelming, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this go. The silence that followed her words felt suffocating. I stood there, staring at her, trying to process what she had just said. It felt like everything around me was crumbling. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had just shattered it all in a single sentence. He's different, she had said, as if that made any sense, as if that somehow justified everything. But I couldn't wrap my mind around it. There were no excuses for this kind of betrayal. My hands were trembling, and I had to force myself to stay calm, even though every nerve in my body was screaming for answers. I wanted to yell, to scream at her, to demand that she tell me the truth, but I couldn't find my voice. Not yet. Rachel seemed unfazed by my reaction. She casually walked over to the couch, sat down, and began flipping through her phone like nothing had happened. It was as if I didn't exist, as if this was just another regular evening, and I was the one overreacting. You think this is funny? I finally managed to get the words out, my voice more composed than I felt. You think you can just do this behind my back and it's no big deal? I had to know how deep this went. Was it just a fling? Or had it been something more? She glanced up from her phone, rolling her eyes. Honestly, you wouldn't understand, she said dismissively. I'm not sorry. I'm just tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not. Her words cut deeper than anything I had ever imagined. She wasn't even sorry. The anger inside me began to boil over, and I could feel my chest tightening with every second. Tired of pretending? I asked, incredulity in my voice. What about me, Rachel? What about everything we built? Did any of that even matter to you? For a brief moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, maybe? But it was gone in an instant, replaced with that cold, indifferent expression. You're not giving me what I need. Derek does. She spoke his name as though it meant nothing, as though he was just another guy, and I was the fool who had been left behind. I felt like I was losing control of the situation, losing control of everything. All my life, I had been the one people could rely on. The dependable one, the one who took care of everything. But this was something I wasn't prepared for. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, was now standing in front of me, telling me that I wasn't enough, that she had to find someone else because I didn't measure up. You've been lying to me for months, haven't you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. All those late nights, those girls' nights out. It was never about friends, was it? Rachel didn't even flinch. She didn't even try to pretend. What difference does it make now? She shot back. It's done. You're just angry because you caught me. Caught. That word hit me hard. Caught. As if this was all some sort of game to her. I had trusted her, believed in her. And now, here she was, acting like it was nothing. Like I was the one in the wrong for being upset. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her, shake her, make her feel the pain I was feeling. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the disbelief of it all. I wanted answers, but Rachel wasn't offering any. Instead, she just sat there, cold and indifferent, like I was nothing more than a nuisance. Then the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? I walked toward the door, still in a daze, unsure of what I was about to find. When I opened it, The last person I expected to see stood there. Derek. He stood there, grinning, as if he had just won some sort of victory. I could see the smugness in his eyes, the way he looked at me, as if he knew exactly how much pain he had caused. My fist clenched at my side, and I could feel my blood boiling. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Derek's grin didn't falter. He leaned against the doorframe casually, as if he owned the place. "I'm just here to finish what we started," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "I thought you'd want to know how everything ends." My mind raced. How much did he know? Was Rachel really that careless? Was she so far gone that she didn't even care who knew the truth anymore? I couldn't process it all. All I knew was that I was staring at the man who had been the source of all this pain, the man who had taken everything from me. "Get out of my house," I said through gritted teeth. Derek chuckled, stepping closer. "I don't think I will," he replied. "But you might want to ask Rachel what's really been going on. She's the one who invited me in." I turned to look at Rachel, hoping for some sign of remorse, something that might make me believe that this wasn't as bad as it seemed. But instead, she stood there, arms crossed, watching me with that same detached expression. "Rachel?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Is this really happening? Did you bring him here?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence said it all. She had been playing me all along. I was nothing more than a pawn in her twisted game. Derek smirked as he turned to leave. "I'll see you around, man. Don't worry. Rachel will be here when I'm done." I was left standing there, my world crumbling around me. The betrayal was one thing, but this was something I never saw coming. I had to make a decision, a choice. But what was I supposed to do? How could I possibly pick up the pieces of my shattered life? I watched Derek leave, his footsteps echoing down the hallway like a hammer hitting an anvil. The silence in the house was deafening. The kind of silence that gnawed at your insides, the kind that made you question everything you thought you knew. I turned back to Rachel, who was still standing in the same spot, unmoved, unaffected by the storm that was brewing inside me. "Do you even care?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It felt like the words were slipping out of me without my control, as though I was no longer the man who had entered this house hours ago, full of hope and trust. "Do you feel anything at all, Rachel?" She just stared at me for a long moment, her eyes cold, distant, as if I were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "You're asking me if I care?" she repeated, almost as if she were mocking me. "That's rich. You should have been asking yourself that long ago." The anger inside me flared again, hotter this time. I could feel it building, boiling beneath my skin, but I knew I had to stay in control. I couldn't let her break me completely. But how much more could I take? How much more could I endure before I gave in to the overwhelming feeling that I was losing everything I had ever loved? "Why, Rachel? Why am?" I asked again, the question hanging in the air between us like a heavy weight. "What did I do wrong? Why couldn't you just come to me?" She crossed her arms, the indifference in her posture making my blood boil. "You didn't do anything wrong. You just weren't enough. You were never enough." The words cut deep, deeper than I thought was possible. They felt like a slap across my face, a cruel reminder that the woman I had once adored had turned into someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone who didn't care about the life we had built together, the years we had spent loving each other. But it wasn't just the words that stung, it was the casual way she spoke them. As if it were no big deal, as if this was just something that had happened, and now we were moving on. Moving on from a decade of marriage, moving on from the life we had planned. I shook my head, unable to comprehend how she could be so cold. "You're telling me this now?" I asked, the disbelief creeping into my voice. "After everything? After all the years?" She shrugged, a cold, emotionless gesture that only made the pain worse. "I'm telling you this because it's the truth. You can't fix something that was broken long ago. You never noticed, and now, here we are. It's over." I stared at her, trying to make sense of it all. It felt like I had been punched in the chest, the air knocked out of me. I was numb. I didn't know what to say anymore. I had questions, so many questions, but the answers weren't coming. All I could do was stand there, looking at the woman I had once thought I knew, and realize how completely wrong I had been. Rachel's phone buzzed, interrupting the silence between us. She picked it up without even glancing at me, her thumb scrolling through the messages as if this were just another day. I wanted to scream, to grab the phone from her hands and throw it across the room. But instead, I just stood there, frozen. She didn't even look up when she spoke. "You're wasting your time, you know. It's already done. I'm done. We're done." The finality in her voice hit me like a freight train. She wasn't even trying to salvage anything. No apologies, no regrets, just a cold, calculating goodbye. But then, as if to add insult to injury, she stood up and walked toward the door. I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow, maybe. Or maybe we won't. I don't really care anymore. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me standing there alone, my mind spinning, my body frozen in place. I wanted to collapse, to curl up in a ball and disappear. But I couldn't. I had to stay strong. For myself. For the children. As I stood there, trying to make sense of everything, I realized something. Something that hurt more than any of the lies or the betrayal. Rachel didn't care about me. She hadn't cared for a long time. The woman I had married, the woman I had given everything for, was a stranger now. And she was gone. I paced around the living room, running my hands through my hair, trying to shake off the overwhelming feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. The anger was still there, but now it was being replaced by a deep, gnawing sadness. I had lost everything. My wife. My trust. My future. But even then, deep down, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her take everything without a fight. If she wanted to end this, fine. But I was going to make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me as if I didn't matter. It was time to make a decision. A real decision. And this time, it wouldn't be about what she wanted. It would be about me. About what I needed to move forward. The pain was unbearable, but it was the only way to start. The only way to truly heal. And I was going to make sure that Rachel would never forget the day she chose to destroy everything. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the silence almost suffocating. I needed air. I needed space. I grabbed my coat and left, slamming the door behind me, leaving everything, the betrayal, the lies, the pain, locked inside. As I stepped into the night, the cold air hit my face like a slap. It didn't numb the pain, but it gave me a moment to breathe. To think. What was I supposed to do now? How could I go back to living the life I had known before this? How could I even look at Rachel again, knowing what I knew? How could I even look at myself? I walked aimlessly through the streets, my mind racing. My thoughts kept circling back to Derek. That smug bastard. He had no right to be in my life, in my home. But it was clear now, he wasn't just some random guy. Rachel had made a choice. She had chosen him over me. And somehow, he had wormed his way into the fabric of our lives, into the very place I thought was safe. I didn't know how long I had been walking, but eventually, I found myself standing outside a small bar on the corner of the street. The neon lights flickered in the night, casting a strange glow on the wet pavement. It was loud inside, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses drifting out through the door. I hesitated for a moment before pushing it open and stepping inside. The warmth hit me immediately, but it didn't do much to ease the chill that had settled in my bones. I found a seat at the bar and ordered a drink, anything to quiet the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. The bartender handed me the glass, and I took a long sip, the burn of the liquor doing nothing to dull the pain. My mind kept replaying everything over and over, the confrontation with Rachel, her cold indifference, Derek's smug smile. I kept seeing Rachel in the arms of another man, her laughter echoing in my ears, as if she was enjoying this, enjoying the destruction of everything we had built. I thought about how she had dismissed me, how she had treated me like I was nothing more than a tool for her own convenience. She had used me. And for what? For him? For some fleeting excitement that I could never give her? It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, the bartender asked if I needed anything else. I shook my head, signaling that I was fine. I wasn't fine, but I couldn't admit that to anyone, not even myself. Not yet. I needed answers. I needed something to make sense of all this. How had Rachel become this person? How had I missed it? The signs had been there, hadn't they? The late nights, the distance, the excuses. But I had ignored them. I had convinced myself that everything would work itself out. Now, I was paying the price for my own ignorance. I finished my drink and left the bar, stepping back into the cold night. I had to do something. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't let Rachel off the hook. Not after everything. I was done being the one who was always left in the dark, done being the one who made all the sacrifices while she ran off with someone else. I went home, but I couldn't bring myself to walk through the front door. The thought of seeing Rachel again, of having to face her after everything, was too much. Instead, I walked around the side of the house, to the back, where I knew the garage door was slightly ajar. I stepped inside, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. There, on the workbench, was the old box of photos that we had kept for years. The pictures of our first dates, our wedding, our vacations, everything we had shared, preserved in those small moments. I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I pulled the box closer. It felt surreal, looking at these moments now, knowing what I knew. I flipped through the pictures slowly, one by one. It was hard to reconcile the woman in those photos with the woman who had betrayed me. How had we gone from that to this? How had I allowed her to slip away, to become someone I no longer recognized? There was a picture of us at the beach, smiling, laughing, the sun setting behind us. It was the perfect moment, but it didn't feel real anymore. That version of Rachel, the one I thought I knew, was gone. I put the box down, my head spinning. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, hoping that things would magically go back to the way they were. They wouldn't. Not now. Not after everything. I needed to face the reality of what had happened. I needed to confront Rachel, once and for all. But not the way I had before, not the pleading, heartbroken man who had begged for answers. No. I was done with that version of myself. I was done being the victim in this story. I wasn't going to beg her to come back. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. If Rachel wanted to be with Derek, then that was her choice. But I wasn't going to let her destroy me in the process. Tomorrow, I would find out what needed to happen next. I would get the answers I deserved. And no matter how hard it was, I would move forward. I had to. For me. For my future. As I stood there in the dark, the weight of everything I had just learned pressing down on me, I felt a flicker of resolve deep inside. I had been broken, yes. But I wasn't going to stay broken. I was done being the victim. Tomorrow was the first day of the rest of my life. And it would be a life without Rachel. The night passed slowly, each minute stretching into eternity. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the room spinning with memories, doubts, and anger. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face, her indifferent expression, her words cutting through the darkness. You were never enough. I couldn't shake them. They echoed in my mind, like a broken record repeating the same cruel refrain. I had never been one to dwell on the past, to get stuck in the what-ifs. But this was different. I couldn't stop myself from questioning everything. How had we gotten here? How had everything we had built crumbled so quickly? I had tried. I had loved her with everything I had. And she had thrown it all away. For him. For someone else. The anger still burned inside me, but it was no longer as sharp. It had become something else, something more calculated, more purposeful. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done being the guy who just takes the punches, the guy who lets things slide because he's too afraid of confrontation. No more. The morning light came too soon, but it didn't bring any relief. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't going to be easy, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But I had to take control of this situation. I couldn't let Rachel continue to dictate my life, to make me feel small, unworthy. I wasn't the problem. She was. I got out of bed and dressed quickly, making my way downstairs. The house felt cold, empty. I hadn't heard from Rachel since the night before. She had retreated into her own little world, probably with Derek, enjoying the freedom she had claimed for herself. I didn't know what she was doing or where she was, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. I had bigger things to worry about now. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. I had never been one to involve anyone in my personal matters, but this was different. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone on my side. I needed advice. I needed someone who could see things objectively. I made the call, my finger hovering over the screen as I debated whether or not to go through with it. But I didn't have time to second-guess myself. I dialed the number. "Hey, Mark," my brother's voice came through the phone. "What's up?" "I need your help," I said, my voice low. "It's about Rachel. I caught her cheating." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Shit, man. I'm sorry. Are you okay?" "Not really," I replied, my voice cracking for the first time. "I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. I've asked her what happened, why she did this. She just keeps brushing me off like it doesn't matter." "I can't imagine what you're going through," Mark said sympathetically. "But I think you know what you need to do." I was silent for a moment, taking in his words. "What do you mean? You can't keep living like this. You can't keep letting her get away with this. She's showing you who she really is, man. And it's not the woman you thought you married. If she's really done with you, then you need to be done with her. You deserve better than this." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was hard to hear those words, but they were the truth. Rachel had shown me her true colors, and I couldn't ignore that anymore. She didn't care about me. not in the way that mattered. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I don't know if I can just walk away, I admitted, the words feeling foreign to me. It feels like everything is falling apart. It's not falling apart, man, Mark said, his voice firm. It's falling into place. You're waking up to the reality of the situation. And that's the first step. You're stronger than you think. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. It was hard to let go. It was hard to admit that Rachel was no longer the person I had fallen in love with. But Mark was right. I couldn't keep living in the shadows of her lies. I couldn't keep pretending that things were okay when they weren't. Thanks, man, I said, my voice steadier now. I needed to hear that. I've got your back, bro, Mark replied. Whatever you need. We ended the call, and for the first time in days, I felt a small sense of clarity. I didn't have to do this alone. I had people who cared about me, who wanted to see me move forward. And maybe, just maybe, I could start doing that now. The decision had been made. It was time to face Rachel again, but this time, I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead for answers. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. If she wanted out, then I was going to let her go. But I was going to make sure that she knew the consequences of her actions. She couldn't just walk away without facing the truth. I stood up, straightened my shoulders, and walked out of the door. This was the beginning of something new. And as painful as it was, I was ready to face it head on. I had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. Rachel had made her choice. Now it was my turn. I drove to the house, my mind clear now. There was no more hesitation. The decisions had been made, the path set before me. I had called my brother. I had let the emotions settle. Now, it was time for Rachel to understand that her actions had consequences. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about closure. For both of us. As I pulled into the driveway, the house seemed quiet. Too quiet. The front porch light was dimly lit, and I could just make out the shadows inside. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the strength I had gained over the past few days. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. No more pleading. No more trying to make her see reason. She had made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. I parked the car, stepped out, and approached the front door. The air was thick with tension, but my resolve was unwavering. I didn't care about the heartbreak anymore. I was done with that version of myself. The broken, desperate man who begged for answers. The man who thought he could change someone who didn't want to change. Today, I would walk into that house as a different person. I knocked on the door. It took a few moments for Rachel to answer. When she did, she seemed almost surprised to see me standing there. She didn't speak at first, just stared at me as if trying to figure out what I was doing there. Her eyes were guarded, but I could see a flicker of guilt behind them. Or maybe it was just the fear of what was to come. "Can I come in?" I asked flatly. I didn't wait for her to invite me in. I stepped past her, into the living room. She didn't stop me. "What's going on, Mark?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but I could tell her voice was shaky. "Why are you here?" I looked at her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'm here to talk. I think it's time we had a real conversation." Her gaze dropped to the floor, then back to me. She sighed, her voice colder this time. "I told you everything last night. What more do you want from me?" I shook my head. "It's not about what I want, Rachel. It's about what you've done. You think you can just walk away from all of this without consequences?" She shifted uncomfortably. "You don't understand, Mark. You never did. You never understood what I needed." That stung more than I expected. She was trying to make it sound like I was the one who had failed, like I was the one who had let her down. But I had been there. I had been everything she needed, or so I thought. I had worked hard, sacrificed my time, my energy for us. And this is what she had given me in return: lies, deceit, and betrayal. "I understand perfectly, Rachel," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I understand that you chose him over me. And now, you're trying to justify it. But there's no justification for what you've done. None." Her eyes flashed with anger. "I don't owe you anything, Mark. You don't get to control me anymore. I'm done with you." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I fought to keep it in check. I couldn't let her see me crumble. I couldn't let her think that I was still the same person who would beg and plead for her affection. That wasn't who I was anymore. "No," I said, my voice low and steady. "You don't get to walk away without facing the consequences of what you did. You don't get to do this to me, to us, and just pretend it doesn't matter." Rachel scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Because I'm not. I don't regret what I did. I'm happier now, and that's all that matters. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. She wasn't even trying to save face. There was no remorse, no hint of guilt. She had completely checked out, and I had been too blind to see it for so long. The woman I had loved, the woman I had thought would be my partner for life, was gone. Then why the hell are you still here? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. If you're so happy with him, why haven't you left already? Her face twisted in irritation. I don't owe you an explanation for anything. I'm not your wife anymore, Mark. And I don't have to justify anything to you. The finality in her voice was a knife to the heart. The truth was staring me in the face. Rachel had already moved on. She was emotionally checked out long before I ever had the chance to see it. And now, she had the nerve to act like I was the problem. You've made your choice, Rachel, I said, the words coming out slow and deliberate. And I'm done trying to make you see reason. You've shown me who you are, and I'm done pretending. I'm not going to beg you to stay. I'm not going to keep trying to fix something that's already broken. Rachel's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. For a moment, I thought I saw something, regret, maybe? But it was gone as quickly as it came. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, cutting her off. I don't need your excuses anymore, I said, my voice firm. You've done enough damage. Now it's time for both of us to move on. I deserve better than this. I deserve someone who's going to love me, someone who's going to fight for me, not someone who's already moved on to the next guy. I turned and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of every word I had just spoken. I wasn't looking back. I wasn't going to make her feel like she had the power to hurt me anymore. She had taken that from me, but now I was taking it back. I opened the door, and before I stepped out, I turned to her one last time. Goodbye, Rachel, I said, my voice steady. And with that, I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, and I didn't look back, because I knew now. It was over. I stood on the porch for a moment, my hand still on the door handle, before I stepped away and walked down the driveway. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. The feeling of finality hung in the air, but strangely, it didn't feel as heavy as I had expected. There was no crushing weight of failure, no overwhelming sense of loss. Instead, there was something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. The relief was fleeting, however, because as I walked further from the house, the reality of everything that had happened began to settle in. Rachel was gone. The woman I had trusted, the woman I thought was my partner in life, had turned into a stranger, and now it was over. There would be no going back, no fixing things, no trying to make sense of what had happened. It was done. I had always prided myself on being strong, on holding everything together, no matter the situation. But I hadn't been prepared for this. No one could be. The pain was there, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. It was manageable. I was managing it. And for that, I was grateful. For the first time in days, I felt like I was starting to take back control. But that didn't mean the pain wasn't still there. I couldn't just erase the memories of the past, of the years we had spent together, the good times, the laughter, the love that had once felt so real. It was all gone now. And though I had made the decision to walk away, to let go of the person I thought I knew, it didn't make it any easier. I had to face the truth. Rachel was no longer the person I had married. She had changed. And though it was hard to accept, I had to let her go. There was no other choice. She had made her decision long before I found out about her affair. She had chosen Derek, and in doing so, she had chosen to end what we had. But what about me? Where did I go from here? The question haunted me as I walked down the quiet street. I didn't have the answers yet. I didn't know what the next chapter of my life would look like. All I knew was that I had to keep moving forward. For myself. For my future. I thought about the kids. What would I tell them? How would I explain this to them when the time came? They were too young to understand the complexities of adult relationships, of betrayal, of heartbreak. I would have to be strong for them, just as I had always been. I couldn't let them see me fall apart. Not now. Not ever. I went to the car, got in, and started the engine. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I drove aimlessly. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to get away. Away from the house, away from the memories, away from the pain. I ended up at a park, a place I used to visit when I needed to clear my head. I parked the car, stepped out, and walked toward the pond. The stillness of the water mirrored the emptiness inside me. The trees were bare now, their leaves having fallen in the cold autumn air. It was a peaceful scene, but it only reminded me of how much had changed. I sat on a bench, staring at the water, trying to find some semblance of peace. But my mind kept drifting back to Rachel, to the betrayal, to the lies, to the things she had said to me, things I would never forget. She had made it clear that she didn't care about me. But what hurt the most was that she didn't even care enough to try to salvage what we had. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. The coldness, the distance, the way she had pulled away from me long before I knew about Derek. She had stopped fighting for us long before I had stopped fighting for her. And now, here I was, alone, trying to figure out how to move forward from a place of complete loss. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the hurt. But I could change how I responded to it. I could choose to move forward, to heal, to take back control of my life. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only choice I had left. My phone buzzed in my pocket, interrupting my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw a text from my brother. "How's it going, man? You holding up okay?" I smiled to myself. At least I wasn't alone in this. Mark had been there for me from the very beginning. Even though he was miles away, I knew I could count on him. It was comforting to know that I had someone in my corner. I texted back, "I'm good. Just needed some time to think. Thanks for being there for me." I sat in the park for a while longer, letting the quiet wash over me, allowing myself a moment of peace before facing the reality of everything that was to come. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days when the weight of the betrayal would feel too heavy to bear. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Rachel's choices define me. I was stronger than that. I was better than that. As I got back in the car and drove away, I felt a sense of resolve settling inside me. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I was moving in the right direction. I was no longer trapped by Rachel's lies. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. It was the beginning of something new. Something that I hadn't expected, but something I could embrace. A future where I would find peace. Where I would find happiness again. And where I would never settle for anything less than what I truly deserved. The past was behind me now. And with every mile I drove, I was getting closer to the life I was meant to live. The next few weeks were a blur. Each day felt like a step further away from the life I had once known, a life that seemed almost foreign now. I wasn't the same person I had been before I found out about Rachel's affair. I had changed. I had been forced to confront things I wasn't ready to face, things I had been blind to for years. But in the process, I had also begun to rediscover who I was. I threw myself into work, into the things that I could control. There were still moments of deep sadness, moments when I missed the life Rachel and I had shared, but they became fewer and further between. I was learning how to breathe again. I was learning how to live without her. And that was something I never thought I'd be able to do. My friends were supportive, but I could see the pity in their eyes. They wanted to help, but I didn't need sympathy. I needed strength. I needed to know that I could stand on my own 2 feet without falling apart. I wasn't looking for a shoulder to cry on. I was looking for a way to rebuild. For a way to move on. I spent more time with the kids, making sure they felt safe and loved, that they didn't feel the weight of what was happening between Rachel and me. I hadn't told them everything, how could I? They were too young to understand. But I made sure they knew that no matter what, I would always be there for them. That was the only thing that mattered now. One evening, as I was putting them to bed, my youngest daughter, Emily, asked me why Mommy wasn't living with us anymore. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How could I explain this to her? How could I make her understand that Rachel had chosen to leave, to move on with someone else? I sat on the edge of her bed, holding her small hand in mine, and I told her the truth, as simply as I could. Mommy needed to go and find some things for herself, I said softly. But I'm always going to be here. You and your brother are my everything, and I'm not going anywhere. Emily's eyes softened, and she nodded, her tiny face scrunching in confusion. But why couldn't she stay with us? I brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, my heart aching. Sometimes, grown-ups have to make hard choices. But it doesn't change how much I love you, okay? She hugged me tight, and for a moment, I felt the weight of everything lift, if only for a second. I wasn't sure if she understood, but she needed to know that she was loved. That was the most important thing I could give her right now. As the days passed, I began to realize something. Despite everything that had happened, despite the hurt, the anger, the betrayal, I had the power to move forward. I didn't need Rachel to be happy. I didn't need her approval. I had my own life to live, my own path to follow. I started taking better care of myself. I began exercising again, something I had neglected for too long. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could let out the frustration and pain that I had been holding in. It wasn't just about physical strength, it was about reclaiming control of my life. I wasn't going to let Rachel's actions define me. I wasn't going to let her destroy my sense of self-worth. The more I focused on myself, the more I realized that I had been neglecting my own needs for years. I had poured everything into a relationship that was broken from the start, thinking that if I just worked harder, loved harder, things would change. But I was wrong. I couldn't fix someone who didn't want to be fixed. And I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of someone else's. It wasn't easy, but I began to find joy in the little things again. A morning walk, a quiet cup of coffee, the laughter of my children as we spent time together. These were the moments that reminded me that life could still be beautiful, even after all the pain. One afternoon, as I was out on a walk, I bumped into an old friend from college. Her name was Sarah, and she had always been a good friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. We caught up over coffee, and it felt good to talk to someone who didn't know the details of what had happened with Rachel. She didn't pity me. She didn't try to offer solutions. She just listened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. We talked for hours, laughing and reminiscing about the past. It wasn't romantic, but it was comforting. It was a reminder that life had a way of moving forward, no matter how much we tried to hold on to the past. Sarah made me realize that I wasn't alone, that there were still people in my life who cared, who wanted to see me succeed, who wanted to see me happy again. That night, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling once more. The pain wasn't gone. It would never be completely gone. But I had learned something invaluable through all of this. I had learned that I had the strength to move on, to build a new life for myself, even if it meant starting from scratch. I thought about Rachel and Derek. I thought about how they had moved on, how they had chosen each other. And I realized that I had to stop looking back. They had their lives, and I had mine. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, to the version of Rachel that no longer existed. I couldn't keep waiting for closure that would never come. Instead, I had to focus on the future, on the possibilities that lay ahead. There was so much more to life than what had happened with Rachel. I had so much to offer, so much to give, and I wasn't going to let the mistakes of the past dictate the rest of my life. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from having all the answers, but it was enough. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. A new path. My path. The road ahead would have its challenges. There would be days when the hurt would resurface, when the anger would return, but I knew now that I could handle it. I could handle whatever life threw my way, because I was no longer defined by Rachel's betrayal. I was defined by my own strength, my own resilience. And with that, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever the future held.